And so I think some of that has to do with we have firsthand accounts from Caesar. First off, he wrote his memoirs on the Gallic campaigns and then on the civil wars, which he took on Cato. And but I think moreover, there's an underlying reason. Today the populist, or in the first century BC, during the Roman times, right before the Roman Republic fell, the populists were known as the Populares. That's what says that was Caesar's sort of party. They dominate political discourse today. It's the same sort of thing. The populists, who are the welfarists and the warmongers, and these are the people that crave power. And I think today power is venerated. Power destroys lives, it destroys property, but is also venerated. And I think you see a whole lot of that. And see, Cato used to be admired. George Washington greatly admired Cato the Younger, and so did a number of his peers, John Adams, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, a number of the other founding fathers loved Cato the Younger and admired his virtue, and trying to restore the republic and standing against one-man rule in Rome. But that sort of went by the wayside, and even Cicero greatly admired Cato, especially towards the end of his life, and they were very, they became friends towards the end of their life. They were kind of philosophical acquaintances. So yeah, we've sort of, he definitely needs to sort of be resurrected, Cato the Younger. But I think what we can learn from him is, where a principled life leads. And if you are going to choose the virtuous path, you are going to run into extreme struggles and extreme obstacles. But that's where virtue leads sometimes, and you must stay the course if you are going to choose right reason or choose virtue.
When you look at our political scene today, is there anyone that you could identify with, or maybe look at and say, this person is like Cato, or this person has some virtues of Cato that maybe we should pay attention to, or is some of what he stood for passed us by?
I think anybody that demonstrates courage in the face of overwhelming majority opinion, of doing something that might not be very popular. There's a professor from the University of Toronto lately named Jordan Peterson, who Canada passed a mandated legislation, mandated law through the Human Rights Commission that says, hey, you have to use like 35 different pronouns when you address people who are of some sort of transgender sex. And he just thinks that's sort of nonsense and ridiculous. And this man could be, because of his refusal to do so, could be thrown in front of a tribunal, fined, or put in jail. And he stood up on national news while he was being grilled by a number of different people on this panel, and they said, are you prepared to face the consequences? And he said, yes. I suppose I have broken the law because I refuse to use these made-up words, these pronouns. Regardless of whether you agree with this issue or not, this man has a lot of courage, and he said, I won't use it. I could be brought before the tribunal. If they fine me, I won't pay it. If they jail me, I'll go on a hunger strike. I won't do it. And those are the people that we need, to stand up against, in the classical sense, for classical principles, first principles, namely the defense of life and private property, which is where the classics come from, and get us back to some sort of sanity, because where we're headed right now is just increased violence, domestically and overseas. And that's really what the enlargement of the state and government and the continued growth of government and the politicization of all pieces of our lives leads to, just more violence.
I wanted to ask you too, Pat, about your writing process, because I really enjoyed this book, and what really caught my attention about this book for a variety of reasons is how the writing was so smooth, and how you took a lot of very complex issues with regards to Stoicism and Cato and all the different aspects of that, and really boiled it down into a really easy easy to read and follow text. As you were writing the draft and putting that together, was that difficult to do? Because I know when you get into some of this philosophical thinking and reasoning, it can get pretty dense. How did you go about that process of trying to get the major points but not overwhelm the reader with so much detail that it slows down the story?
Well, I started practicing the Stoic philosophy myself just a few years ago. I'm a lifelong Catholic, by the way, and I don't find a conflict there. I think people live in harmony. Actually, Stoic ethics had a great deal of influence on the early Christian thought, namely Augustine and Thomas Aquinas for sure. But as far as the writing goes, I studied all the primary sources. We have nothing written from Cato the Younger's hand, by the way, except for one fragment of a letter he wrote to Cicero is all that remains from him. I went through and read all of Cicero's letters that we have. There's hundreds of them that still survive. I read, all of Cicero's political treatises, and then, of course, Julius Caesar's primary sources, his memoirs, along with Cassius Dio, his Roman history, some Tacitus, Appian. So basically all of the Roman ancient historians to kind of interweave my own analysis on Cato's life and the fall of the Roman Republic as I sort of have understood it. And so how I kind of made it a little bit easier to read. I didn't want to oversimplify things, but I wanted the layman to be able to pick it up and easily understand what was being put in front of them. I just carefully chose the words, and it just sort of came out, I think, pretty good and acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a great book. How long did it take you to write this book?
It didn't actually take me that long. The research probably took a month late at night, just going over ancient texts, and I don't read Latin or Greek, so I had to go back and forth between different translations. I would say I started last summer, wrote for a couple months at night, on and off, and then I had to take a break because my day job picked up, and then I had to start campaigning for the election. And then I picked it up in late November, and I think the first draft was done by Christmas, but it didn't come out until this past June just because work at the State House. So I'd say all told about 3 months of putting it together.
Very good.
Yeah.
Now, you're the author of a couple of other books. I wanted to ask you about those. We mentioned those at the beginning of our interview. Printing Our Way to Poverty, The Consequences of American Inflation. And certainly, just the title alone has a lot of connotations for kind of what we're experiencing today. But just give us a brief summary of what that book is about. And did that book come before your Liberty Essays book, or that was the first one?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first book I wrote back in 2012. I think I made some important contributions to the field of economics in that book, but it is about monetary policy, mainly about central banking, and how over the last 100 years, central banking and the debasement of the U.S. currency via the Federal Reserve and government spending in Washington has essentially destroyed American manufacturing. It has really destroyed the middle class, and it has also led to increased foreign wars overseas that are very unnecessary. And so that's what that's really about. And then it also explains why depressions occur, and it puts a lot of myths, I think, that public school students are taught to beg. That's really what that's about. It's a little bit more academic-ish, but if you want to really understand monetary policy from a free market standpoint, it might suit the purposes there.
How about your second book, The Liberty Essays, Restoring a Lost American Principle? Tell us a bit about that.
That was I co-authored that with a close friend named Ashley Stennett. That's about 350 pages long, but it's really a series of essays broken down into different categories. Myself, I wrote, and then Ashley wrote, and that deals with natural law philosophy. It deals with some Greek philosophy that I wrote. It also deals with free market economics. It deals with constitutional government, and it deals with a non-interventionary foreign policy of peace, basically. Basically, all of these principles that you would think of under the umbrella of liberty. If you love liberty, then you should understand and advocate for a lot of these principles, namely free markets, non-intervention overseas, sound money, constitutional government, these types of concepts, and we try to boil it down for the layman, all in one book where you don't have to read it from page 1 to page 350. You can pick out what essay you want to study on. So.
Very good. Which book did you think was the hardest to write?
Actually, believe it or not, the monetary policy book, Putting Our Way to Poverty, I wrote in 1 month. I'd say the hardest book to write was probably the Liberty Essays, because that was my first book I wrote with someone else, and we had to constantly communicate and mix and match and try to figure out, which of his essays we were going to include, which of mine we were going to include, how to cut it down. We didn't want it to end up being 1,000 pages long, so that was probably, I think, the most difficult. And we were under a tight deadline from the publishers, so that's probably the most difficult one. This one, my latest one though, Stoicism in the State House, I'm very proud of, just because I think it can really help someone out, even if they're not interested in Roman history, if they're not interested in early Greek or Roman philosophy or thought. If they're just interested in politics, if they're just interested in a good story, or if they just want some advice on how to live a better life and deal with stress, this book could really help them out. One important thing, memory that I have, and I talk about this in the preface that I wrote in the book, is meeting. I got to meet Vice Admiral James Stockdale, who passed away in the mid-2000s. But I met him as a freshman. He was a little freshman at the U.S. Air Force Academy.